Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder, and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating.
Disclaimer. This recording is not intended to be utilized as medical advice or a medical diagnosis. If you think you're in need of medical attention or treatment, please seek it immediately. This recording will also contain sensitive subjects such as binging and purging, weight, and depression. Please listen at your own discretion and do what you think is best for you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a special podcast episode today because I have a Binge Breakers Recovery Community course member on here today. And even more importantly than that, I have someone on here who has been through bulimia. She's tried a lot of different things and she is at a point where she's feeling really good. She was just telling me before this call and last week that her life is feeling a lot more present. And she said, I'm having a busy week, but from a bulimia standpoint, it's not a big deal. So I'm really excited to bring her on and have her on as a guest to share her wisdom and knowledge with you guys and her story. But anyway, so I would love to introduce you guys to Aoife. Aoife, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks for having me. I think I was telling you last week I was so nervous, but after our chat, I'm actually just super excited to kind of get on and share my story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we talked. I talked to everyone before the podcast, but we had talked beforehand because there was a lot of things going on, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. But first, could you just share with us, where you're from and how long have you struggled with bulimia?
So I am from a county called Limerick in a little island called Ireland, and okay. I suppose I first started bulimia maybe when I was 16, 17. Probably started off with a bit of restrictive dieting, kind of down the more anorexia route, and then fell into bulimia, I suppose, for most of my adult life then, when I'm 29 years of age now. Yeah. So it's been a long journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I like asking people that because a lot of people are like, oh, it only happens when you're younger or whatever. And no, it can last a while, and it happens to all ages too, which is another good thing to point out. But tell me, just a little bit about your story. Where were you? Let me try to phrase this correctly. What was bulimia like for you? If you could give us a snapshot of that.
I suppose there were different periods where, throughout the kind of 9 years where bulimia helped me. And I know that sounds bizarre, but it numbed me out so much that I got through things. But then through the latter years, it almost had me in a chokehold. Every day I was, what felt like I was victim to this monster, and it consumed every thought that I had. Every action was revolved around it. I was never present with, friends, family members at events, but I presented myself as if I was. So it was extremely exhausting. It was like I was living a double life, really, is kind of what bulimia felt like. I was living a double life.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes up so much of your time, so much of your mental space. And not only is it physically exhausting, but it's mentally just draining all the time.
Yeah.
So what type of I know you struggled with it for a while, but what type of treatments did you seek? How did you try to get help for that?
I suppose I sought out traditional therapy, and that I went to my GP, and, I was referred to a psychotherapist. I was referred to a dietitian. I've seen psychologists. Tried loads of different therapies, CPD based, mindfulness, different programs, and I suppose it got me out of a rut, but it never fully got me over the hump. So I'd have a few times throughout that period where I was fine, but ultimately I never addressed the underlying problem or issue, where I kept falling back into it. So then I one day found your podcast. I think I must have just Googled, and I think it was you had just released it that exact day as well. So I know it's the first person to get onto. When you brought out the course, I was like, sign me up straight away, because everything you said just resonated with me. to a level that I'd never had with any of my therapists or, any of my, during any of my treatments. I'd never felt that connection, and I just clicked and got it. So yeah, and then it was a hell of a lot of work after that.
Well, that's kind of the meat of it, but like what was the work? Like what was the hardest part about you in recovery? Or hardest part about recovery, I should say.
So I suppose starting off, I was still so reluctant. Every time I failed, just thought, no, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. But I suppose listening to your podcast and being a part of the group, you're kind of reminded that this is part of the process and you have a little bit of support. But the biggest, I suppose, learning point for me that really turned my perspective on bulimia and having bulimia was knowing that I could choose, that I ultimately I had the power to make a decision whether I wanted to or whether I didn't want to. And up until that point, like I gave my power to every therapist or to every diet or to every, self-help book. I wanted that to fix me rather than actually taking ownership. So I think it was a rude awakening. There was tears and it was hard to swallow that, all this time that I had the choice to do it and I had the choice to not do it. But yeah, I got to that point, I suppose, through journaling, through mindfulness, through pausing, that pause method. Although I hated every single second of it, it really, really helped me. It really helped me realize that the power that I have, and the control that I do have. Whereas I was so flippant before and saying, it just happened, I had no control, I lost all control. Whereas slowing things down and sitting with those horrific feelings of anxiety and fear and hunger and, despair almost, were really worth it, because all of that just made me realize that, yeah, look, you go through that, but you can still choose. You don't have to respond. You don't have to respond the way that you've always responded.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't always have to be this way. And I just talked about this on my podcast today about choice and choosing, and a lot of people get really upset about that. Partly because you're like talking about mental illness, and of course you can't choose mental illness, but you can choose a lot of the actions that you do, right? And I'm curious how you didn't, because a lot of people take that and they blame themselves then, and they just like sit in this point of like, I hate myself for the choices that I've been making. And you spoke a little bit to that, but how did you not let that go to a really dark place?
I suppose I had a lot of groundwork done, even carryover from previous therapies and previous interventions, about self-compassion and trust and, just really, I suppose, being mindful of myself. So having that kind of work done first helped me see the logic, in, okay, like you have this habitual problem, you're in a good place. So it's not your fault, it's something that your brain has been wired to do. And I just took, as you said, I took the drama out of it. Everything was such a drama to that point. Whereas if you take the drama out of it, okay, what is it when it boils down to it? It's a habit. Right. Just like I'm not going to decide to, I can, if I want to, I can decide to stop brushing my teeth one day, but I know the consequences of that. So I'm not going to. But that's how I started to view it, in like, okay, the consequences, you can choose to do it. It's a habit. It's, but again, there was a lot of work put in for the emotional side of it and, awareness side as well. But that's ultimately how I suppose I didn't succumb to being so harsh on myself.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I think this goes without saying, but like you were mentioning, you did a lot of work beforehand, and I did a lot of work before I ever stopped the behavior as well. And I don't think you're able to be in a clear spot if you're like in this really deep, dark place, in this mental hole of like, I hate myself, or just in a loop of self-loathing. It's really hard not to take the drama out of it, right? So that's good.
Absolutely,
yeah, you had that experience before. But once you like get things cleared up, I think this is what you found, is that once you're in like life isn't like crazy and you actually feel really good, but you still keep doing the binging and purging, and you're kind of like, why am I doing this still, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just it doesn't really
and you just have a clearer mind.
Yeah. Yes. And so you're kind of like, what's going on? So you said you had to like sit with emotions and that was excruciating and you hated it. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that was that way?
Um, I suppose again, up until the point of when I started working with you, I would have been go, 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 like constantly fill my days with activities, work, meeting up with friends or whatever. And I realized that I was doing that to avoid stuff. I was avoiding the feeling of anxiety. I was avoiding the feeling of, fatigue or anything uncomfortable. And that's where, when those did slip in, I would just fill them up with food and binging and purging. But when I started to slow things down and, you've brought in the bit of self-care and, I started to realize, hang on a second, like there's something else going on here. And I remember the first time I sat with an urge, I think it lasted maybe 45 minutes and I had to go lie down in bed. I was so wrecked. Like, it was the most exhausting thing. It was like I'd just done a workout. But I got through it. It was horrific, but I got through it. And then, the next time it wasn't that long and it wasn't as intense. Maybe it was 40 minutes, but it gave me, I suppose, the belief that, actually you can do this no matter how tough it feels and seems.
Yeah. That's crazy that it lasted 45 minutes and that you still then got up and did it again, right? After having to like go lay down and stuff like that. So you got through it. How did you know you were through the urge? I'd be curious to know that.
I suppose anyone that has had urges will know that, like, that real heart racing, palm sweating, kind of choking feeling, it just eased. That real intense physiological feelings just kind of surpassed, and I just felt calm. And then I kind of knew. Yeah.
It's almost like, because like an urge, you have to, people like resist it and you have to just kind of let it in, but eventually it will fade away. So I'm glad that you experienced that, even if it was for like 45 minutes. That's really rough. And you saying that you had to like lie in bed too. There was a big period in my recovery where I had stopped binging and purging, but I spent a lot of time in bed, like just lying down. So I was exhausted a lot of the time from taking on life again,
Yeah. Coming home from work now, one of my favorite things to do is going for a 30-minute nap. Whereas before I would have felt so guilty, like so anxious, and that I wasn't utilizing my time, or, whereas now it's like one of my favorite activities of the day is my nap after work.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That sounds like a lot of fun. I like napping's hard for me. Usually if I nap, it's because I desperately need to sleep, but then I end up feeling awful afterwards. But the people that can nap, like, I'm jealous. That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's interesting because you're like, yeah, I would have felt bad before about using my time, not like, I don't know what, with people with bulimia, maybe in particular, we feel like we have to be doing something all the time and have to be utilizing the time perfectly. How did you get over that?
I think, like, it took time as well. None of this happened overnight. I think, when did I start with you? In like September? Was it last year? Yeah.
Yes.
And only until, I'd say, maybe the last 4 months that I really started to just, I suppose, have structure in my day, and, structure where I chose what I want to do and what I didn't want to do. Whereas before I jam-packed everything. And I think it just, being present made me realize that, you know what, I actually hate doing this. I really don't want to go to this person's house. I really don't want to, go on this run, So being present, which I suppose, coming back to the pause method, taught me stuff about myself that I did not know, that stuff I did not like and stuff that I did like. Because up until that point, if you asked me, I would have said, oh yeah, I'm the most easygoing person. I just say yeah to everything. But I've really learned what I don't like, which is amazing,
Yeah. You told me before, I used the phrase of like, I was off with the birds, I think is the phrase that
Yeah,
I heard. Um,
yeah,
and you said you were like you always said like you're, like you said, easygoing and not very opinionated, but you said now you've developed a lot more opinions about things, right?
yeah,
Not that
absolutely.
they've
And
happened overnight, but you realized you had them.
mhm. um, and I think again that just keeps empowering you to, be your authentic self, and not, people pleasing, or not just trying to avoid being with yourself, which I ultimately probably was trying to do. That being present, it's not even what I learned that I do like. I learned so much that I don't like, which if you asked me a year ago, I'd be like, oh, I like everything. Give me an activity, I'll do it.
Right. Yeah. What's something that surprised you that you didn't like?
I absolutely hate doing the grocery shopping
That's
so
funny.
much. It is the most tedious task. And look, not related to bulimia or anything. Like, I would have always been like, oh yeah, I'll go do it because it was a helpful task, and it killed a bit of time, and I was up and I was active. Whereas now
Mhm.
I dread it. Like, every week I'm just like, oh
That's so funny. You're gonna have to like do a meal prep service or something like that. That would probably
yeah,
be easy for
yeah.
you. Yeah. I hate doing laundry. It's like I always avoid it like the plague, and then suddenly we don't have any clothes. So I have to do something about that. We need a laundry prep service. But no, it's interesting when you say like you get more present and suddenly you realize that's the scary part I think about bulimia recovery is that you open yourself up to feeling again and then you notice there's all these things in your life that you kind of want to change, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I think it's because you're so stuck in, I suppose, this limbo zone that we talked about, that you just go with the flow of life, and it's not that you particularly dislike it, but there's nothing that really excites you either. You're just like stuck in this kind of mundane, you know routine. And as soon as I started to become more present and had more time, because I think anyone that knows that's been through bulimia or anorexia or any eating disorder, that it consumes so much of your day and your brain capacity, that once that starts to lower, you have so much more time to do things that you want to do, and read things that you want to read, or career wise, if there's something you want to do career wise.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
so
So
there's
you
loads of
have made
benefits.
changes in your career too since then as well.
Yeah, and I think, as I was saying to you, that like prior to this, I wouldn't have had the confidence in myself to put myself forward to do certain things in my career. I would have just stayed where I was, and kept doing what I was doing. But I really started to believe in myself. I started to have more time to invest in my education, and I pushed myself to get to the job that I really want to be at right now. And look, it is hard. It is time consuming. I am learning so much every day, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, but you're actually like enjoying it, even the hard times, right? It's a different type of enjoyment, I'm sure. I'm sure there's some days
Yeah,
you
and
don't love it, but
oh, like every job, yeah, there is days that
mhm.
you don't, but the fatigue, I think I was saying this to you as well, when you come home after a week of work, is so much, it's like an enjoyable tiredness compared to the fatigue from having an eating disorder. you know
Yes.
it's it's
Yeah.
it's hard to put into words, but anyone that has been through it will understand, um that fatigue that you get from doing things that you really enjoy, compared to what the eating disorder was making you feel.
Yeah. And it's almost like you're fatigued for a reason that you actually enjoy too, right?
Yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
you're like I'm fatigued from something that wasn't even that great versus being fatigued from something a long day of like work that you really enjoyed and a life that you enjoyed for sure. I'd love
Hmm.
to ask you about body image and stuff like that. How did that go during your recovery?
So I think this is one of the areas that I will continue to work on.
Hmm.
And I'm not even going to say continue to struggle with, because I'm at a point now where I'm just completely neutral. So, like, I'm not great, but I don't think I'm struggling at the moment. But that took months of work to just get to neutral. And it's a good place to be. Like, I focus on what I can do. I focus on how my body feels. I focus on what it does for me task wise every day, rather than what it looks like in jeans, or can I fit this tank top on? And getting to that point took a lot of unlearning habits and unlearning, I suppose, a lot of societal views that I had, and then focusing on, I suppose, the neutrality and the body functions and all that. But I do want to get to a point of where I can say I love my body. I can honestly say I'm not there now, but I don't hate it. So yeah, I think that mind switch of looking at my body in a completely functional way really, really helped me in recovery.
Yeah, because it's really hard to go from like I hate my body to I love my body. But you can definitely say like you love your body for a lot of things that it does for you, and
Mhm.
appreciate its functionality so much more because it's what you have, right? And
Absolutely.
I was discussing this with someone else, but like it's very normal for people to just have bad body image days. People that have never struggled with eating disorders or anything. They just like, you don't always love how your body looks. And that happens for a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
It's
Totally.
not,
Like there's
yeah,
not one person. Yeah.
yeah. It's not like, so it might be, I think all of us have this image in our head that like, oh, at some point we're just going to like always love our bodies. And it's like, it's kind of a work in progress relationship always. And it may be normal to not always love how your body looks, but that deep hatred for your body, that's probably more of an issue.
I think, a big contributor to my eating disorder was being so body focused. I think, look, you grew up in the, early 2000s. I grew up in the early 2000s. We went to school
Mhm.
in that era where, America's Next Top Model and Kate Moss and all that were the like poster girls. And that
Yeah.
like subconsciously was kind of ingrained into, that this is what beauty is. And I suppose despite, uh, looking at every other body type and stuff, that's still what girls strived for. So that was a big contributing factor to, developing the eating disorder. And I had to unlearn all those societal views that I had in me since I was very young.
Oh my gosh. That must have been like I mean, I know it's a painful process. What was like maybe your first step in letting go? How did you let go of some of that?
So I don't know if I got this tip from you or from someone else or from a group member or podcast, that to unfollow anyone on social media that, doesn't make you feel great about your body. So that was kind of
Mm.
step one. Then step two, I started following, people with disabilities, people with amputees, and body diversity, culture diversity. You know, my Instagram now is an array of human beings. There's no one prototype that you'll see, which just opens my eyes to, everyone, rather than this one particular body type, which I think massively helped me, even though it must have all been subconscious, because if you're looking at Instagram models every single day, that has to be coming into you somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So by making those few changes and, becoming a lot more body neutral, I just started to accept that this is where I am and that's okay. And this is where these people are at and that's okay too.
Right. Yeah. It's not like anything's better than the other. It's just kind of like seeing it, knowing we're all different. That's so helpful. It just, and you're right. Even if you're not like thinking when you see a supermodel, like, oh my God, I'm a horrible, like my body's horrible because it doesn't look like her or whatever, it still kind of is like, that's better. Right. And like this little
Mm-hmm.
mindset you have. And I still am all for like people trying to like we both work out. So I'm all for like trying to better your body and like make it look, you're allowed to make it look a certain way, if you want, but coming at it with a place of like self-hatred just isn't going to go super well. So being okay with it no matter what is such an important skill to learn. So I'm glad that you're on that path.
Yeah. And I think, was it you that told me that like nobody has ever hated themselves into the body that they want, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Even if they do, it isn't very pleasant.
no, absolutely. And just learning to be content where you are and wanting to strive for more, that's fine. But like the biggest thing was being happy where you're at.
Yeah, exactly. People think that if you're happy where you're at, then you're never going to want more. And that seems to be quite the opposite in my own life. And it sounds like that is for you. Once you're kind of like happy it then opens you up to being like, I want more of this, right? So you start to go after things like you've seen in your own life, which is just amazing. But I wanted to ask, I have like tons of things I wanted to ask you, but let's talk about like your recovery. When did you kind of know you were getting to the place of being recovered?
So look, being honest, the lockdown COVID 2020 was probably the worst year for the majority of the world. But for me, it was the biggest learning curve opportunity that I've had in my entire life. And it gave me the chance to recover, I think, because everything slowed down and I had full focus on, committing to this and just seeing what I could do, what I was capable of doing. So after I joined the course, which was September, right? I think.
Yeah.
Obviously there was a few months or a few weeks where it was, going great, and I'd have a slip up here or there, but the overall picture was great. And then, I think around November time, I was very down in the dumps, and I just thought, okay, this is just another thing that, isn't going to work for me. And, it is what it is. And I just have to accept that this is the way I have to live the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful and lucky that I have a partner that's so supportive, and so encouraging and so relentless in ways not to let me give up, So he really, really gave me, I suppose, the belief when I didn't have it myself. Like when I really didn't believe in myself, he had, he had no doubt in his mind that I could do this. And I fed from that, I took that from him, and I started to believe in myself again, and kind of got back on it and was going through the modules, implementing things. And then it was maybe, I suppose, late December, I maybe had another week where things were rough, and just, I don't know, I got into that slump again now, but the slump started to ease off a bit. They weren't lasting as long. And then I suppose kind of January onwards, things just started to make sense and click, and everything that I'd worked on in the last few months just started to fall into place. And, suddenly I wasn't relying on my partner for belief. I started to believe in myself. I was like, okay, you went X amount of days this time, and, you only relapsed for a few days. So you're doing great. And then the next time. And, it eventually got to a point where, I was marking on my calendar, and I was like, oh God, it's been 2 months and I haven't made myself sick. And I think that realization was like, whoa, like you can do this. Like this is a life that you can live. This is something that you thought was so unattainable. But here you are living it,
They can sneak up on you.
Absolutely. And no more than when I used to say that, oh, I just binged and purged out of nowhere. It just happened. It took complete control. Like this, I thought the same with this. And I was like, hang on a second, it didn't. I had a choice, and I chose to do this. I chose to recover every day, and I put in the work, So I think your brain wants you to downplay a lot of it, where, take the wins, like no matter how small they are, take the wins and keep adding to them, really, I suppose, acknowledge your accomplishments the whole way up. I think at the start I wasn't doing that enough, and I was focusing on my failures so much.
Yeah. And
I think getting to the point where, I was 2 months, maybe 2 and a bit, and I suppose there was a bereavement, and it was a very rough time family wise, and I think all the circumstances that would have made me relapse before were all in place on this particular day. I was PMSing. I was alone. It was, I had a vomiting bug, so I had woken up with extreme hunger. So obviously there was physiological triggers going off. And I did. I think I told you this, like I relapsed that day after going so long. Without.
It was about like 4 weeks or so, right?
Yeah. Even longer. I think it may have been 6. And it was strange because during that relapse, I just stopped. I just said, hey, I don't want to do this, whereas I'd never been able to pull myself out of that before. It would have just been a whole episode, and that was it. It would have been done. But unknowns to myself, I was so present, I was so aware, and I was so aware of my choices. And once I got to the point of purging, I was like, hang on, why do you want to do this? Like, look at how great your life has been up until this point. Look how much you've achieved. Look how much work you've put in. Do you really want to do this? And I just said no. And I got up and went back to my room, watched some Netflix, and got on with my day. And I think that was maybe a month ago, like 3.5 weeks ago. And like, there's been nothing since, I really was so anxious and nervous to tell you this. I know the last time we planned to do the podcast, I'm being honest, I thought that I'd be a fraud saying that I was recovered when this had just happened. But I think after our chat, I realized that, every one of those slip-ups is a learning opportunity. I'd never been in that situation before. So now I have been. I'll know that I'll never make that choice again. And that recovery isn't one big straight line. You can have a straight line, but you can have a little bit of outliers along the way, and that's okay. That does not mean that your recovery is sabotaged, that you're back at stage one, that all the work you've done is for nothing. If anything, I think it has made me stronger, and it has cemented in my mind that there is no way I'm going back.
Ah, that's so cool. Yeah, I remember us talking about it last week, and I didn't think you were a fraud at all. I was like, this is important to share. And I hate the word relapse too, because it really almost kind of doesn't acknowledge all the success that you've had and all of the progress that you've made. And I told someone, one of my other clients, I told someone about your story, about how you had gone 4 or 6 weeks and had this happen. And because this client was going through kind of a relapse herself. And I was like, it doesn't have to turn into this thing. And it doesn't, this person was able to just make that decision and be like, no, I don't want this. And like, you can do that too. It's amazing that you were able to let that not just bring you all the way back down and just pick yourself back up and move on.
Yeah. And I think, Jacqueline, that, if I hadn't put in the work in the last few weeks and months, and hadn't, I suppose, become so aware of myself and my body, that I would have just used it as an excuse. And, I could have been sitting on the phone with you saying, it just happened, and that was it. And then like an hour passed, and there I was getting sick. Whereas bringing it back to the biggest learning point that I had is that I have a choice. And no matter how difficult that choice is, it still comes down to, do you want to do this, for the rest of your life? Do you want to not do this? And that's it. Take out the drama. And I did. And it was uncomfortable, but it passed.
Yeah, it's very sobering, I think, is like the term for it, where you're in there and you're wanting to do all these things, and it's like, wait. You bring it back to you, and you're like, do I want to or not? And the answer is usually no. And even sometimes when you're like, no, I really want this, you have to question, like, would you have said that 2 hours ago? Or would you say this in the future? And the answer is almost always no, of course not. But no, I think it's really brave of you to share that story. And I think a lot of people will relate to it. And also, we were discussing this earlier, but we wanted to share the story because, like you said, recovery is not linear and things happen. And it doesn't make you a fraud. It makes you a real human being. And it's like you said, it's a learning opportunity. And now you kind of know, if you're ever in that situation again, how to handle it. And you also have more faith in yourself that you can handle it. You can trust yourself to handle it the best of your ability, right?
Absolutely. And I think I was saying that, you hear these recovery stories, and they're difficult initially, and then all of a sudden it just seems to be smooth sailing for a lot of people. And it's very rare that you hear where people are recovered, because I'm not going to say I'm not recovered, because I am. People who are recovered, slip back for an episode or two, but they get straight back to it and they're recovered again. It's I suppose reassuring to hear for someone that's going through that no, that does not mean that you are not recovered. It means that you are part of a normal variant of recovering people, that absolutely. You're on that spectrum of recovered. So don't think otherwise. Don't doubt yourself.
Yeah. And it's like as if like judging yourself, we attach such morality to it, like, oh, this person's doing better than we are. And it's like they're on their own path, just like you. And I think something else cool that you said that I would love to backtrack to a little bit is you said acknowledging your own success. And that is so important. We always, like, I see people do it all the time. They'll have successful weeks, they'll go a while and they'll blame other things for it. They're like, well, it was an easy week, or yeah, just I didn't have any urges, or my partner was here the whole time. And it's like, no, you made that happen. And for those of you guys listening, like, Aoife has worked really hard and she's a part of the course and that has helped her, but she's the one that implemented it. She's the one that kept on trying. She's the one that reached out when she needed help. Like you created this, which I think is just so empowering.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if you had me on this a year ago, I would be shying away from that compliment and I would be deflecting everything. But I've really just started to own it. I'm like, yeah, I did that, and yeah, it was tough, and I feel great that I've gotten to this point of where I can actually accept my my flaws and my errors, as well as accepting, okay, you've actually succeeded quite well there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you accept your flaws and errors, you do it in a way where it's like, this is what we need to work on. It's not like when I mess up now, it's usually like, oh, I probably should have done that differently. It's not a look at you, you're such a failure anymore. It's much more constructive, right?
Yeah. And it's coming from a place of compassion rather than, trying to beat myself down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that I think everyone needs more of. It's just like that self-compassion. We think it's going to make us like make room for excuses when really it allows you to do more things because you're not gonna beat yourself up when you make mistakes. It leaves room for error, I think is a good way to put it. So I might ask you, and I feel like I have good ideas of what you're going to say, but I don't know. If someone who's struggling with bulimia right now, they don't know like what to do. They're just like they need some sort of advice. What's like the main advice you would give them?
I know this is so cliche, but to believe in yourself and to know that if I can recover, and honestly, I heard people say that all the time, oh, if I can recover, you can. But honestly, I was in the depths of despair. I had just given up to, okay, this is how my life is going to be. But you can. It takes a lot of hard work, and I think you need to be ready for that. And if you're not, then recovery isn't the option for you just yet. But if you're ready to do the work, and believe that you can, reach out, get help. This isn't something that I would choose to do alone, because I've tried it alone and it's just a lot harder. Listen to podcasts, get a coach, become part of a group, get some self-help books, whatever you can do to improve your knowledge and I suppose your involvement in the community of eating disorders. I really think that speeds up recovery. And I don't mean to say it in that you're going to be recovered in 2 or 3 weeks, but it takes out the chances of error, I definitely tried to recover myself, and look, people have done it and fair play to them, but I ended up just critiquing myself and going down the wrong restrictive paths and finding new diets, and I'd spent a lot of time and money doing that, when really, if I was with somebody who had been through it before, or somebody that was going through it at the same time, it would have made a lot more sense, and I would have saved a lot of time and money, and I could have related and given advice and taken advice, So yeah, I kind of went off path there, but believing in yourself, being ready to do the work, and being a part of some sort of a community or having some support system.
Right. Yeah. And I understand what you're saying there. Like believing in yourself is core. I just talked about that on the podcast today as well. That because like if you don't believe, then it sounds cheesy, but if you don't believe, you're not going to even try. It doesn't make any sense. But also with like the getting help thing, like you said, you can recover on your own, but it like you discuss it, it leaves it when you get help wherever you can find it, it's putting you in a much better position to not leave things up to chance and also to have support when you need it when you veer off path. Like with you, when you had lower moments, you had the support of your partner, you had the support of our community, and you kept pushing, right? And you kept reaching out when you needed help. So I think that's when that can really come in handy and help people.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, if I was to do it alone, it's not to say that I'd never recover, but I might still be, at the start of recovery, or I might still be exploring areas that I don't actually need to, or that don't benefit me. I think having somebody guide you, having some peer support, having that belief when you don't believe in yourself, which I had from my partner, all of that, I don't want to say accelerated, but it did, my recovery, and it kept it flowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like having that course correction near you. And and I always like on this podcast, I try to strike a balance of like helpful content, but I don't want to like advertise the course like obsessively or anything. But what
Mm-hmm.
might have been helpful for you inside the course was that like seeing others in the group going through the same thing as you, right? And like seeing that, oh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. And I think as of late, being a part of that Facebook community is invaluable. Like, it's completely mind blowing to see how honest and raw and helpful that people going through the exact same thing that you are, or that you have, are putting themselves out there, and it's things that no psychologist, no psychotherapist, no partner can help you with, because they haven't been in your shoes. Whereas these people, you don't even need to explain, they just get it, and
Mm-hmm.
there's something really raw, but something really refreshing about being in a community like that.
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic, but I'd imagine that being a part of some sort of alcoholic community would be the same effect, that there's this kind of unspoken bond between you.
Yeah, you both shared the similar experience. I was talking to a client who she is a recovered alcoholic as well, and she was saying peer support was so valuable to my recovery because they can help you in a way they understand. Like you're saying, you don't have to explain to them; they just get it, and they can say things to you and push you in ways that no one else can, which is just it's magical too. And I've heard so many people tell me like with the group coaching calls too, it's like it's nice to know I'm not the only one that's crazy, right? Going through this. You're not
Yeah.
alone. And I think that's what like the importance of sharing this podcast too is you're not alone, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Peer support and being around people that are in similar situations, it's just invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so exciting. I'd love to ask then to maybe wrap things up, but what is the best part about where you're at right now in your life?
The best part about where I'm at. So I suppose I'm doing things that I always wanted to do, career wise, sport and activity wise, family and friends wise. Like, I am choosing to do things on my terms, which is so bizarre for me. I always pleased other people, did things because I felt like I needed to. So yeah, I think choosing what I want to do every day, is probably one of the best things. Choosing what I want to eat every day is, I know, to somebody who doesn't have an eating disorder, that kind of sounds like crazy, but it's one of the
Right.
most amazing feelings to, pick something out of the fridge, put it in my lunch bag for work, go to work without any drama, any thinking about it, any anxiety afterwards, and, go home and have dinner in the evening and do the same thing over again.
Oh,
And
this sounds like a
having the
dream.
evening to go for a walk or go for a swim without having that guilt or anxiety or fatigue from an eating disorder.
Mhm.
I think my life is like the way I would have imagined it, you know like I could have only ever dreamed for it to be like this. And there's nothing spectacular about my life. It is the most normal, mundane life, but it's like a dream come true to be in the position that I'm in now and to be present and to not like some things and to be pissed off at work and to be pissed off at my partner. But I'm choosing to do all of that.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. I love that you said that at the end, because it's like things still happen, but you're there for it, which is, it's so much more fun. And it is like a dream, even though it seems so mundane, but you have the comparison of not being there for it before and with bulimia. So that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm happy that you're going through all this. And I think it's so brave and vulnerable what you're doing here too and sharing it, but just like brave that you went through this journey on your and chose to do it. And it's amazing. It's really inspiring. And I say this, I think people think I'm being cheesy or whatever, but like talking to people, like talking to you, seeing what you guys are doing, it really inspires me. And it just makes me grateful to be able to see it and know you guys for sure. But
thanks, Jacqueline. And I'm so
go ahead.
Okay. I'm just saying I'm so grateful that you have created this community. You know, if you asked me 2 years ago if I would have been a part of a Facebook group with all, you know, people who have bulimia, I would have been like, God, no, you're crazy. But it's like my favorite thing of the week is the Wednesday Facebook Live or the Thursday group call. You know, I get so excited and to hear other people's progress and to problem solve other people's problems. You know, it keeps me motivated and it keeps me wanting to continue to do better. Like, even though bulimia has stopped and my eating disorder has kind of stopped, there's still so much other progress that I want to make that I never thought that I, you know, would be able to before. And being a part of a group and working on that stuff, you just want to keep bettering yourself. And I know that sounds cheesy as well, but you do.
Yeah. And it's like there's more and more. You start to get a little greedy for life, right? In a really good way. And you're almost taught to like, oh, you shouldn't want for things, but it makes life like you have a lust for life, I think is so amazing. So I'm smiling. I'm really happy to hear this. And I mean, I know I've talked to you before, so I know some of these things, but it's just, that's all really, really cool. That's my informative opinion of it. So thank you for sharing your story on here, Aoife. I'm sure a lot of people relate, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jacqueline. And sorry, just before we go, I know I'd mentioned this to you, and it is something that I hated doing at the start, and I still do it to this day now. So journaling. I was the most anti-journaler you would ever come across. I just thought it was stupid and I didn't want to write my ideas out. And I didn't want to, what is the point of this? Like, you know, nobody's reading it. It's just words on paper. But I did it reluctantly and kept doing it. And, you know, it became a habit where I'd have my coffee and water in the morning and I'd journal or I'd brain dump, whatever you want to call it, you know, get all that crap out of your head. But what I started to write was my reasons why every single day without fail, and they never changed. So it was always the same reasons, and every time I looked at them, it, you know, there's something bigger than me, and you know, it just kept reminding me every single day. So no more than when you're looking at Instagram with these models, like subconsciously that's going into my head every single day, that this is the reason why you're choosing. And for something that I hated so much, it's now just like second nature to me in the morning. It happens and gets me set up for the day, and that's it. You know, when something must be going on in my brain when I write it and I see it, to keep me motivated and to keep me, you know, focus on my goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that, because I have a lot of clients that come to me that are very journal resistant. A lot of people are journal resistant because they think it's like,
I was one of them.
Yeah, that's so funny you said that. But you writing out your whys every day, so powerful. And people think, well, it's just writing down the same thing every day. But your brain forgets things. You forget things as a human being doing a million things a day. Like, it's really hard too when you're in the middle of your life and then you have an urge and being like, I don't even want to try today. Having really important whys and writing them down and reminding yourself of them constantly will help you go through that, because it's like, no, there's a reason. We're not just going to say fuck it. Here are our reasons. Remember, we wrote them down today. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really good tip. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for all of you guys listening out there, and I hope that this has helped some of you guys and inspired some of you guys. So please never give up on yourself, my friends. Hey, if you like this episode, you have to come check out the Binge Breakers Recovery course. If you're trying to recover from bulimia and you're sick of doing it alone and you feel like you've tried a lot of traditional therapies and it's not working with you, come join the course. Go to bingebreakers.com/recovery-course.